So the developers clearly have taken the 25 plus bugs that the hacker has, probably 30 if we were considering all the bugs in the gallery, plus the ones that aren't really associated with a hacker but other towers interacting with a hacker. You are probably looking at about 30 bugs that the hacker had upon release. Now, to be fair to the developers, a lot of these bugs were very niche. The only problem is the hacker tower is now perceived to be a rush tower with a load of bugs upon release. However, to be fair, how are you meant to detect glitches with, say, jail towers challenge? That's a lot of challenges you have to play with the game. So I don't want to see anyone slating the testers for not testing out the hacker tower in like a niche game mode such as jail towers, a game mode which only appears like 1 in 7 times really in a given week, so it's not really that relevant, but it is still a bug. However, that being said, the developers have not just fixed hack bugs in this update, they've also fixed some skill tree update issues. So an issue, apparently, is range not being consistent in hardcore mode. This is because there was some consistency issues when I believe the skills were here. Here's a fun fact. Hardcore mode has disabled skills. I don't know if I've released the video for that yet. However, the modifiers that pertain to the skills, you were briefly seen here before being removed when hardcore mode started. Now, the only issue is, skills are meant to be disabled in hardcore mode, but I think visually the ranges were glitched because of like the enhanced optics and everything, and also the fact that the visual range that you see for the towers isn't from enhanced optics, it's actually from something else completely. I think it must be something to do with like reinforcements or something like that, their boost, or no, beefed up minions, because they have a percentage which actually is visually used for the range. Now, it might be visual, it's not the actual range for the tower, so the actual range of the tower, you'll see that it won't attack the outer edges if I had the skills enabled. It's just the statistic here that shows up as that range, but it's not the range that the tower actually uses. Secondly, in hardcore mode, another thing that the developers have fixed is the hacker tower automatically skipping the wave once you place it down. Yes, for some reason, when you place down the hacker, you could skip a lot of waves. Now, this isn't an issue exclusive to hardcore mode. For some reason, I also saw this in Fallen mode. When we tried out the hacker tower for the first time, we saw this issue in Fallen mode. Now, I'm not sure if the developers have fixed it in other game modes or if it's just in hardcore mode specifically, because, again, I was aware of it in Fallen mode, so maybe the developers fixed it worldwide. We'll have to see on that. But yes, the free pass that the hacker tower gave with auto skip, yeah, that's not possible nowadays, because auto skip is a VIP game pass feature or VIP plus subscription feature. You can't really use auto skip without these products. However, the hacker tower technically enabled you to use this product because it automatically skipped the waves for you. The only problem was, you can't really disable it. If you place on the hacker tower, everything will speed up, which is not necessarily a good thing. Maybe you will want some time early on in hardcore mode to place down the hacker tower and other stuff, and not immediately skip it. The wave that comes to mind is something like the Molten Boss wave, where it may take quite a while to defeat the boss, not necessarily the time when it takes up to get to the skip wave feature, but sometimes it does. And if you skip the wave with the Molten Boss active, it may screw you up, so that's heavily not recommended. So with the hacker tower, yeah, that could cause some issues. Next, they fixed an issue where the hacker tower was immune to stuns. Now, people have said that this immunity to stuns could be a feature. It isn't. It's because of the rig that the hacker tower uses, common with some other towers in Tower Defense Simulator. But as you can see here, you can see that the hacker tower is now stunned. The only problem is the stun particles for the hacker tower is slightly around the neck of where the hacker tower is meant to be. Now, I assume that this is only for the Triumphant Hacker skin at max level, because as you can see here, the stun particles are correct for the base level hacker. It's just that I assume for the Triumphant Hacker skin and the Fallen Hacker skin, when they start floating, the stun particles won't be that visible, but they're still there. Also, interestingly enough, it seems like the developers may have fixed the issue where if the hacker tower was being stunned by the Soul Steel move, as you can see here, they won't get their beam stuck here. However, an issue that I see is the hacker tower doesn't spawn in any souls. Yeah, so the hacker tower seems to be impervious to soul stealing from the Void Reaver without being damaged by... Well, they do now get stunned by it, but they don't have a soul stole from them. Again, this is very common with towers of the same rig, such as the Flea Jester and the Biologist Tower. So developers, you're adding like a temporary fix for an issue that is present in a load of towers, so I don't know if that's what you're targeting, but fair enough. Now, I do have to wonder if they fixed the hacker tower not being able to be frozen. Yes, okay, so the Fallen Titan seems like it can actually freeze towers again, which was an issue previously where the Hacker Tower was unable to be frozen. So it does indeed seem like they fixed stun-related issues relating to the Hacker Tower, including the fact that it can't be frozen, and including the fact that it can't be stunned. However, what about debuffs? Because an interesting thing back in the day was the fact that the Soul Stealer couldn't debuff the Hacker Tower, and it doesn't look like it can debuff the Hacker Tower. It didn't, in fact, it couldn't even seem like it can Soul Steal from the Hacker Tower because no soul is being produced from the Hacker Tower. The Hacker Tower does have hidden detection, so if there was a soul here, it should have been able to target it. However, it can't, so it can't be Soul Steal from both the Soul Stealer and the Void Reaver. But I think that's more of an issue with the rig of the Hacker Tower. And it also seems like it can't be debuffed, which makes it, well, so developers haven't really fixed it. They've just added some light touches to some of the bugs that the Hacker Tower has. And yes, I indeed can confirm the Hacker Tower is not affected by debuffs. But also, the Hacker Tower seems to just be aiming at the feet of Wox the Fox. Now, I assume that's where its hitbox is, because you can't really highlight Wox the Fox, because, yeah, if you're trying to highlight the Wox the Fox enemy, you can't really do that. Likely, this is because the hitbox for Wox the Fox is all the way down here, but you can't even hover over it to select Wox the Fox. This really isn't an issue with the Hacker Tower, more an issue with Wox the Fox, which has always had since release. Next, the developers have fixed an issue where the Hacker Tower was able to clone a tower, and if you were to restart the game, well, actually revive the game, it's not restarting, the clone tower would actually become a permanent tower. This was quite an OP bug because it could allow you to bypass some placement limits of towers, such as the farm, such as the Gatling gun, and such as the minigunner. So it could be very OP in that regard. However, there was also an issue where clone towers would also contribute to the placement limit of the Hacker Tower, and in fact the global placement limit. So for example, if you had 40 towers out of the 40 towers that you can have in solo mode, and you place down another tower, such as a cloned Gatling gun, that wouldn't be able to be done because they would contribute to global limits. Similarly, if you have 39 towers, you were to clone the turret into another turret, and then you were to try and place down another non-restricted placement tower, such as the minigunner, then you wouldn't be able to do that. However, another bug I want to report is you can collide with the triumphant hologram here. Yeah, in fact, you can collide with the drone for the default skin, so I assume it also works for the Fallen skin as well. Next, there was an issue where with ghost enemies and for flying enemies, when they were killed, they would actually deal a lot of tick damage to the other enemies that are in the game. So if I was to have a soul boss here, and then were to spawn in a Void Reaver, set the time scale back up to 1, you'll notice that the damage of the unit doesn't go crazy, and the Void Reaver does actually take the damage from the ghost enemies, and I assume the flying enemies now, and it doesn't deal an outrageous amount of DPS, like 10,000 in some cases, which is actually just tick damage. It seems like when there's an issue with tick damage, it changes it so it has about 10,000 DPS, which is very interesting. However, in this case, they have fixed it now. Next is a bug very, very niche, which I've only talked about once in the videos about the Hacker Tower bugs. Plus, I've also reported it onto the bug report form. So either the developers are stalking me on the bug report form, or they're stalking me on YouTube. And given the fact that they've had a history of stalking me on YouTube, I wouldn't be surprised. However, there was an issue where if you were to use the Hacker Tower clone on the farm, and then place down the farm here, and then you were to use the Thorns ability for the Harvester, as you would expect, the updated farm, the cloned farm, does have boosted thorns because of the Harvester's synergy with the farm, and this is expected, even with the clone tower. However, once the clone had ended, an issue that was experienced was the fact that the thorns thought that the tower was here, thereby meaning that you could have a load of cloned farms, formerly cloned farms here, and that it would just slowly build up the amount of thorns here. However, now the developers have supposedly fixed it. So if I were to use the thorns ability again here, you'll notice that yes, there is less thorns here. There's still the additional thorns from the farm, but there are no thorns from the clone farm. Next, there was an issue where converted enemies were affected by the nuke consumable fallout damage. So the enemies weren't originally, well, former enemies weren't originally affected by the nuke damage itself, but they were affected by the fallout damage which came afterwards. However, that is not the case. The corrupted enemy here didn't get affected by the fallout damage from the nuke. Next is an interesting thing. So the developers, upon realizing there were a bunch of crates after the season had ended, namely the ugly crate, the coin crate, they have now been removed from the store. And by removed from the store, I mean you can't really buy them, but you can still open them if there are skins for them, which is what is always meant to happen. However, that being said, I think most people have redeemed the skins that they could. You can't really open additional skins if there's only like one skin in the crate. However, very interestingly, developers have also taken off sale the Ducky Crate, even though the Ducky Crate was seen as a permanent crate. In fact, it even appears in the quests, the mission quests for Tower Defense Simulator. So I'm not entirely sure why the developers have done this. And it has always been on sale since it was added in 2023. So to take it off sale now, after 2 years, that must have been one hell of a bug that developers did not realize that the Ducky Crate was actually meant to be seasonal. However, I'm not entirely sure if the developers saw Ducky Crate when they were taking the Coin Crate and the Ugly Crate off sale and was like, oh wait, the Ducky Crate is not meant to be here. Because originally, the Cold Front Crate was also meant to go off sale back in the day. The developers announced that it was a limited time skin for like a month, because back in the day, there was meant to be a feature where there was like a monthly rotating crate. However, the Cold Front Crate never actually became off sale, even though it was speculated it was going to. Luckily, I have a crate for the Ducky Crate, so I get to keep it. That being said, a lot of people probably are missing the Ducky Crate, given the fact that it costed coins and it was assumed to be a permanent crate. Well, apparently not. It's a seasonal crate. That being said, I would expect the Ducky Crate to return every time there's an Easter event or a spring event, similar to the original intentions for the Necromancer Tower, which was meant to return every Halloween. And what actually does happen for the April Fool's event, it returns every year on the 1st of April to last a week until the 8th of April. Next, there was an issue with the skill tree where when you were refunded, it actually gave you decimal coins, including 0.5 of a coin or even 0.25 of a coin, which was very interesting. However, the developers have now fixed it, where the skill tree price calculates now round down always. Next, the developers supposedly fixed an issue with the hacker's placement cursor being finicky to place down in certain situations. The only problem is, I don't know what those certain situations are because I never actually reported that bug. Placement cursor being finicky to place down in certain situations. The only bug that I can really think of is the cloning bug, where sometimes the cloning highlights weren't over the actual tower. That being said, apparently it's not a bug, that's a Roblox issue with the amount of highlights that you can have in a game, except that's not really how Roblox sees it, because I reported the highlight issue to the bug report form, and people have said that actually it's a Roblox fault because they don't allow that many highlights for some towers. That is true, but the Roblox documentation on this says that it's been disabled after 31 highlights. The hacker tower seemingly sometimes disables it after 16 to 21 highlights, so I'm not sure if it's a Roblox issue or if it's a TDS issue. Certainly after 31 towers, it seems like the hacker tower can't highlight all the towers in the game. Next, another fix to not the hacker tower or the skill tree, but to the hidden wave. So sometimes the hidden wave wouldn't activate correctly under certain situations. This led many people to believe that the hidden wave had been disabled because However, it does seem like it was a glitch and you were meant to always activate the hidden wave, so the developers have now fixed it. Finally, they fixed the hidden wave prematurely ending due to the Awakened Fallen King dying. I assume what happens is that because the developers used the Awakened Fallen King code for some of the new Fallen King attacks, it meant that when you defeated the Fallen King while having the hidden wave activated, it seemingly told the game, right, well, the Awakened Fallen King has now died, please reward the people with hidden wave rewards because they've just beaten the hidden wave. That is no longer the case. You can't get a free hidden wave win. It seems like, I haven't tested it out for myself because I'll have to go through the rigmarole of going the hidden wave, but it seems like that issue has been fixed. Now, that being said, that is the last issue apparently that's been fixed in this update log. There are still a whole host of issues with not just Tower Defense Simulator, but namely the hacker tower that developers have not fixed, including the hacker tower still attacking enemies when jailed. So yeah, even though we've got about 15 bug fixes here, there's still a lot more to do.